PC here. Hi guys and gals. Well, I hope you're all well. I have just come back from geocaching. Well, not quite. I mean, I've had time to take a shower and, just kind of relax. And now I'm just going to make a little vlog, which I talked about while I was geocaching, just hinted at it. And then I thought, no, I'm geocaching. Let's, show the sights and stuff. And if you want to do a vlog, do it at home, relaxing, and of course there's a little bit of noise in the background. Somebody's mowing. There are at least two places that are mowing. You know that every now and then I read an article in different magazines or newspapers and then bring my own take on it. A few days ago it was something I read in Scientific American. This time it's something I read in the Atlantic magazine, which is actually quite good. It's a little bit to the left, but it's usually quite good. And it was the unconscious rules of personal space. And that is actually quite interesting. I mean, many of you have probably noticed at one point when there was President Trump and Emmanuel Macron, which is the president in France, and he basically, Donald Trump grabbed his hand and basically almost pulled him into himself. I mean, he's, as far as the other person was concerned, he was pulling him into his space, or he was invading his space. And there's a whole article here about that, about how we see our personal space. And I think that actually has a lot to say, about introverts, extroverts as well. But that might not. I don't think that was actually mentioned in the article. But I was thinking about that because when I used to work in the farm industry, I had a French colleague who would basically, I'm not going to say step on your feet, but almost, he would always come up so close to you, and everybody would say, he's a nice guy, but he's annoying. He always comes into we could almost say our personal space. Now, there are, actually it was a person, no, I didn't actually quite grab that at the time. It was somebody in the 50s, a person from Zurich, who had studied animals, and he changed the size of the cages, when the animals were close to each other, and so on, and like the animal's personal space, and so on. Now, what one does see is there a lot of birds here, aren't there? What one does see is that personal space very often is something that is also almost ethnic. Now, they've made studies in the was it the Arab world? I believe it was. Yeah, I'm not quite certain about. I could imagine anyway. Yeah, it was the Arab world. Yes, it was. Okay, they made studies there where, as a general sense, the people tended to come a lot closer to one another. I've noticed that I had quite a few Arab friends, and that is true. They were always really, really close, and it kind of like got uncomfortable at times. That is one thing, but you kind of have to adapt to it. That's the way they are. Stereotypes maybe, but I think there is something like that. The Swiss tend to have a rather large personal space. The English have a much larger personal space. It's really quite interesting. I mean, like, I work with the Irish now, and I've lived in England as well. The personal space in Ireland is smaller, nevertheless, than the one in England. And part of that actually is, I think, due to the fact is that it's the way probably you interact with people. I think one saw that a little bit at the wedding of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. I mean, you could see that was it Bishop Curran, the way he was talking and everything, just he was verbally coming into the personal space of the public there, at least of the British public there. It was really interesting to see how that was. I had a chat with a colleague at work on this because I said you could do the psychology of personal space. Now, the Swiss have a rather large personal space, and yet some of the national dishes, if you want to call them that way, fondue, raclette, and stuff like that, are stuff that are taken in a common basin, or and you kind of like get together and you get close together. So is there something like, is food something that brings you together in a personal space? Americans, for example, have a lot of buffets. Does that show individuality? I'm not quite certain about that. The Swiss are very individual. But I'm certain if we could do the psychology actually of food and eating and personal space, we'd probably get some interesting studies and correlations in there. Were there any other things about that? One thing was actually the amount of stress. I mean, people that have actually have very tight personal space, they usually get very stressed if people come close to them. And that's one thing. The other thing is also people of authority usually have a larger personal space, which is kind of interesting because, let me see now. Well, for example, President Trump, on the other hand, has a very close. He pulls people towards him when he talks and something like that. And yet, normally, persons of authority will try to keep people away. That's very interesting. I mean, one would have to look and see, for example, how other people were. I'm certain that Joseph Stalin, for example, didn't have people come up right close to him. Just an example. But it is interesting. Were there any other things that came out? Let me see. Oh yeah, that's a creepy little thing. They were saying they made a study. Imagine they made a study in restrooms, and they had like men at urinals, and they would make purposely people come close to them and see how long it took them to pee. And of course, you can almost expect that. The more people were close, the more the people got stressed, the more it took time. So I don't know if that's such a great test. Let me see. Social distances, if it's a cocktail or a meeting, if it's a cocktail, you might tend to close into people. One of those reasons, though, is actually, it's not written here, is that sometimes in a cocktail situation, you just don't hear what's going on. You have to get closer. Business meetings, we tend to be further away. Were there any other things like that? Oh yeah, there was one thing that came out quite interesting, was about social media and personal space. Our physical personal space can be quite large, and our social media space is often very, very close. And people tend to be actually very often quite different in their social media way of acting than their real life, if we could call it that way of acting with people. They invade personal space or let people come into their personal space. Anyway, that was it. What do you think about that? Do you think it makes sense? Is there something that needs to be said about personal space, ethnic personal space? I touched a lot of things, but anyway. So that's it. Yeah, DC signing off. Take care, everybody, and I hope you have a great Saturday. Yes, bye-bye.